Okay, detail. Let's start at the front, shall we?
Yep.
So, anchor locker.
Yeah. So we're going to be cutting a great big hole in the anchor locker. We're going to be welding over the hole that was originally. So last owner, you can start that one again if you want.
Current access is through the V-berth.
That's it. So we're going to be welding that back up and then cutting in from the deck downwards.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
So we'll have a hatch in the deck into the anchor locker.
Yeah.
The biggie for me is that we would have a solid bulkhead that way.
Yeah.
We should add all of the steelwork on LP is 5mm sheet steel, and she's got 4 bulkheads. One major bulkhead fore and after the engine bay, one major bulkhead at the end of the V-berth right in the bow, and one at the stern. So it means that if she ever gets breached, if the hull gets breached, you can separate her off.
Yeah.
Hopefully better than they did on the Titanic.
Hopefully.
But what it means is that by reinstating the hatch that the previous owner cut into the anchor locker for accessing the V-berth,
makes it watertight
it
again.
means, yeah.
I was just thinking as well, because we're looking at cutting metal away from the back of the boat, maybe we can use that to fill a gap.
Potentially, yeah.
We'll see, yeah.
Sheet steel, I think, in terms of our costs, is going to be...
Not too bad.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the cheaper parts of the things we're going to have to buy. But the cutting into the anchor locker and reinstating the hatch, looking at windlasses that run with the motor internally and the winch mechanism externally, so that the majority of the working components that matter are out of the elements and safe, while still being a working windlass. But also it frees up a lot of the bow area, because at the minute we've got a massive windlass right on the bow, which means that when you're trying to hook up on a mooring, when you're
just getting to the front to go sit on the bow and watch the boat go up and down, look for dolphins as you do. And even just the sail as well. The sail did happen to catch on her. I'm sure it wouldn't, but...
No, absolutely. But it just frees up some deck space there.
Just a thought on that as well. If we take all the chain out and make a fake floor which goes in at the bottom, which has got drainage, then the chain won't block the out into the bilges as well.
So that's the for the front of the boat changes, and then at the very stern we're looking at the moment we've got a gas locker, and we're going to get rid of the gas systems on board. When we bought her, she had a gas-fired boiler, hot water boiler, which was condemned before I bought her, so that was ripped out straight away. The cooker is also currently gas.
Yep, and she's been great for us. I mean, the oven's not great. I've tried cooking a chicken, and it's it was raw on the outside and really well cooked on the in a.
Oh, okay, thing. Yes. I was going to say, how did you cook it on the inside and not on the out? Anyway.
Well, you know my cooking.
Yeah.
But equally, we're electrifying, so there doesn't seem a point in continuing to have the gas oven and hob when we could switch to an inverter hob. Induction hob, sorry.
Yeah.
And get a conductor.
We've got on board a microwave / oven, so it can cook both ways concurrently.
Convector oven,
yeah. And we're going to put, whilst the electric engines are going to run off 48 volts, we'll have an inverter down to 12 volts for the lighting and such like, and we'll also have an inverter up to 240 volts. So things like a microwave / oven, an induction hob, a kettle, things like that. So long as we rate the inverter correctly, we're going to have in excess of 1,600 amp hours in our battery bank at least. So we're going to have massive amount of power. So hopefully it should mean that the cooking facilities being electrified shouldn't be an issue. But what all that does is it frees up the gas locker, because at the moment the very stern of the boat has a lazarette that you access from the deck, and at the back of that is a locked cabinet, a locked gas locker in which you can fit 3, are they 25 kilo, 20 something kilo gas canisters. So it's a big area. What we plan on doing is we're going to get rid of the lazarette completely, because it's a bit of like a black hole. We chuck stuff in there that then never sees the light of day.
Yeah.
Things like old wetsuits and
we've had engines in there,
pieces,
ropes and bits, but actually there are probably more effective places to store them now.
Yeah.
And
so we're going to make the lazarette solid deck and bring that space into the aft cabin, but the chain locker is too far back to make that useful. So what we're thinking is we're going to cut into the chain locker and actually make that a diving platform, so that when we're getting on and off,
chain locker?
Sorry, not chain locker, the gas locker.
Yeah.
So that when we're getting on and off the tender, when we're diving in the water, things like that.
When we go into some Mediterranean moorings where they have like the aft in and plank down or anything like that, it's just going to be a lot easier getting on and off her.
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, to get from the water line back onto the boat, it's what, 3, 4, 5 feet.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No.
And we've had some good laughs trying to get back onto the boat, but also some bruises.
We have a very small step system on the back of the boat at the moment, but it's neither very aesthetically pleasing and very easy to use at all. So we think that actually chopping into the gas locker and repurposing that as steps will be the best use of that space.
Much safer for getting on and off.
Yeah. Structurally, those are the biggest changes. Taking out the lazarette is massive. At the moment, it's the full width of the boat in the back section, the furthest back part of the boat. It's quite deep. It must be about 2.5, 3 feet deep at least.
Yeah. Just above hip height.
Yeah. And it feels like it is fantastic having that amount of storage space externally for any boat owner, but for us it's not space we use very effectively. So bringing that inside as to the main cabin will be incredibly useful. The other structural big change we're looking at is, at the moment, the cockpit is a centre cockpit boat. She's got quite a deep cockpit. It makes for sailing a incredibly secure and safe and easy. You feel, regardless almost of the sea state, you feel very safe in her. But she's got a stainless steel frame with a canvas cover on the cockpit at the moment.
Yeah, it served us well.
Yeah,
it's been
absolutely.
great for getting on and off, especially living aboard. A canvas cover's been great, but actually,
we think it's time. We're going to make some changes. So at the moment, the splash hood at the front of the cockpit is solid metal. So we're going to change that.
Leans in quite severely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
we're going to change that so that that's transparent perspex, so that we can get a much clearer view of where we're heading. We're going to extend it up slightly, so that, because at the moment it's solid metal, then it's clear plastic as part of the canvas cover. So we're going to extend that all the way up so that we've got a solid splash front. What's the phrase for that? I don't know what they call that. But and we're going to put on a solid steel rooftop to the cockpit, so we can get away with the stainless steel frame that's holding the canvas in place. And on top of that canopy then, or a solid steel roof, we can walk on it. So in terms of fixing the lazy jacks, fixing the boom, those sorts of things, it's much easier. Potentially we could mount solar panels on it if we want to. It gives us lots more flexibility. It gives us a much more secure cockpit.
Yeah, and we're going to have the runner for the boom on the
top
as well.
Yeah, so
it gets it off the deck. Not a trip hazard again. Just much smoother decks. Really.
The other main physical change, because we're looking at putting a sail furler on for the foresail. LP, her mast is set right in the middle of the boat. She's a 14-metre boat, and the mast is at 7 metres from either end, which means that her foresail, compared to many sloops, is massive. Most of her energy comes from the foresail, compared to the proportion between foresail and mainsail for other boats. So we're looking at putting that foresail onto a self-furler to make it much safer, much easier to sail.
And the option for a solo sail
is
much better. Even if you go out and there's not just solo sail, if there's a couple of you, all it takes is for someone to get injured, and then suddenly, you need to be multitasking, and it's going to be a lot easier if you can do that from the cockpit.
Yeah. Our budget is for just one self-furler, but including the new sail, and it is a massive sail. I can't remember the exact square meterage, but it's a lot. If we can afford it, we may put in a second self-furler that we could use sort of like as a storm jib, something like that. But we'll cross that bridge when the budget allows. But the other main physical structural change we're going to make is, at the moment, she's got a davit frame, a steel davit frame at the stern. It's very low. It's only about 3.5 feet high. So getting on and off the back of the boat is incredibly difficult because you're crouching below it. It's got a single solar panel on it and some of the nav equipment. What we're going to do is we're going to remove that completely. We're going to put on a new, hopefully stainless steel frame onto the back, onto which it'll be big enough, one, that you can walk relatively comfortable underneath it, so maybe between 5 and 6 foot high, but also it'll be big enough to carry ideally 3, hopefully 4 200-watt solar panels on it, as well as 2 wind vanes, wind generators, and also all the nav gear. So it's going to be a big old structure, and it may well extend forward a little bit more than it does at the moment, almost creating like a bimini type setup.
Yeah.
On the underside of which we can store things like our surfboards, windsurfers, paddles, things like that.
Yeah.
So that'll give us a lot more flexibility. Structurally, LP's in amazing shape for her age. She's got a little bit of rust here and there, but nothing much. We're not anticipating at the moment, touch wood, we're not anticipating any major structural issues.
Yeah.
But by doing this now and stripping her back completely internally, it means that we can examine all of the plate metal and treat it properly, not only in the bilges but also in the head linings and on the sides of the hull.
Yeah, and everything, as we do that as well, we'll, I mean, the things that we say that we don't think is going to be a problem, the things like we will be changing, we will be changing all of the seacocks, and we'll be changing the
hydraulic piping for the steering.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the major things really are going to be taken out, replaced, because actually doing a major refit like this, it just doesn't feel right to leave certain things that are going to be so much harder to access after this.
Yeah, absolutely. The other change, one of the other changes structurally internally, is at the moment we have a 1,000-litre water tank and a 750-litre diesel tank, and that's it. So the plan is we keep the 1,000-litre water tank, and hopefully we can rig up a desalination unit to keep that topped up when the solar or wind vanes are generating more power than we need, and we can just divert that power into either an immersion heater in that water tank or into desalination unit, so that we are not wasting any renewable energy. But also the diesel tank, 750 litres to run a generator and hot air heating system is a little excessive. So what we've decided is we're going to separate out that diesel tank into 2 separate halves, and it's constructed as 2 separate tanks with a small bleed outlet between the two. So actually configuring it as to 2 separate tanks is going to be very straightforward. And then the new half, if you like, 375-litre tank will become our black water storage tank for when we're in marinas, when we're in areas where we don't want the sea toilets discharging straight out to sea.
We've been really fortunate with the marina we're in at the moment. The facilities are great, so we've just been able to always use theirs. We just haven't bothered with any kind of black water on the boat at all. So
let's give a brief tour of the boat. So you've got the anchor locker, the very fore section of the boat. Then you're going to have the V-berth coming back, which is going to have a double bed setup in there rather than the traditional V-berth system. That might be a little bit higher than most actually, but what we'll end up with is we'll have lots of storage underneath and a seating area come storage space opposite that, so that it becomes a nice self-contained unit.
Yeah.
We'll do the saloon.
Yep. So in the saloon, we wanted to go with a U-shaped sofa area and a table across here, and then have a pilot berth on the opposite side. The U-shaped berth we want to be a double bed, so we've got that. The only thing is, where we've chosen to have a heads now down the fore end of the boat, we're restricting the space here a little bit between the galley and the heads, but it's still a 5 foot.
It's 5 foot some odd in any one direction, but if you're sitting corner to corner or lying corner to corner,
yeah, so we can have a couple of short people in this area.
And it is emergency.
It is. And actually, you know, the pilot berth and both of the main beds in the cabins are well over 6 foot.
They're proper bed size, yeah.
Yeah. So we're not too concerned by the fact that this is a little bit smaller. But what we would like to have is a table which flaps out so that you've got a really nice sort of communal seating space here for
up to 8 people.
8 to 12 people or something. Obviously 8 people can stay on board if we do this, and we have a second pilot bed just above this one. So yeah, then that would open up the lounge for a really sociable space, which is nice. And having the heads here so that you can come down from the cockpit and come straight in here is really helpful as well, rather than having to go back past the engine bay.
The pilot berth we're rigging as a sofa during the day with a back sofa, but we're going to rig it and manufacture it in such a way that the backing of the sofa can fold up and it can become in effect bunk bed. So you've got twin pilot berths there. That's the plan with that.
Yeah.
But also, if you sit on the end of the pilot berth, the D shape there, U shape there, is going to be a nav table, a flat nav table. So you can have somebody sat on one side of it using it as a nav table or as a workstation, and someone sat opposite as well. So it's going to be wide enough and flat enough and accessible enough that 2 people can work on it at the same time.
It's a nice big space, isn't it? It's just really good space for doing chart plotting, project brainstorming and stuff like that. We kind of, because it's quite open plan here as well, you could even put a stool here and then have a third person around the desk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You should add, her beam in the widest part, which is around the galley come nav station. She's 4 meters wide, so she's over 12 feet wide. She's a nice boat in terms of space. That's one thing that we don't have to worry about too much, actually.
Yeah.
Then moving back, at the moment, the midsection here between the 2 bulkheads is the engine bay, and this dotted line area shows the access panel from the cockpit above, and that's pretty much where the 250 horsepower Mercedes sit. That'll be going completely. The 2 electric engines and the battery banks and the controllers and the inverters, all those sorts of things we're going to put in there. And then, because of the reduced amount of space that they need compared to diesel engines, we're going to put a shelf, lid, cap, whatever you want to call it, onto that section. And then the remaining, what must be 3 feet or so between the floor of the cockpit and the top of that section, we'll then use that as storage space for, who knows, whether it be spares, food,
tools,
equipment, who knows. The great setup is you have a walkway currently from the main saloon through to the aft cabins. That's it, yeah. So that walkway at the moment has the electric boxes, the fuses, and a bench there. We're going to keep the bench. That's going to become like a workshop. So we're going to have table clamps, vices, enough electricity and venting there that we can actually do work and fabrication work there, repairs, that sort of thing. It's a little bit restricted in terms of head height, but you can walk all the way around the engine bay. So the back section, the great thing with that is it gives you access to seacocks and everything else you'd want to, the bilges and such like, on the opposite side of the engine bay. We're going to keep that, and that back section is going to be our wet weather gear store, and we're going to have that to a drip tray that goes into the bilges. and then washing machine, which is where we currently store it, that'll be running in that area as well, with a little tumbler. It's got a spin dryer built in.
Just a little twin tub, really.
Top down thing, yeah. It works brilliantly for us. Draws very little energy and water, but it does a nice job. And then the area between there and the bulkhead is going to be dedicated for things like our hot water heating system, our hot water boiler, our hot air heating system, our possibly generator. We've yet to decide on what model we're going to go for and how big it will be. But that's the engine bay.
If we just jump back into the saloon, we forgot to talk to you about the galley.
Yep.
So the galley used to be along here, and we're shifting it. Is that right?
Yeah, back to the original position.
So we're shifting it back to the original position. And it's actually really easy in the sense that we're going up against a flat bulkhead.
Yeah.
So we've got a nice, easy kitchen kind of going in, and then on the curved bit where the boat kind of shapes around.
The curve of the hull.
The curve of the hull. We're going to have our hob here on a. We are going to have it set on a gimbal.
Yeah.
We kind of
induction. Yeah.
Wasn't sure if that was totally necessary, but actually it looks like really it's the safest and best option to have.
Absolutely.
Because you can be cooking all weathers then.
Whilst it looks like it's a bulkhead between the galley and the saloon area, that's actually going to be like a dwarf wall, so that you can talk to people while they're sat around the saloon, pass food through. It needs to be a sociable area. Something that's not separated out. But what it does mean is that the space beneath the sofas, we can do drawers that access from the galley there. So it means that we've got pan drawers, big storage drawers there, that from both sides, both underneath the units on the aft bulkhead, but also underneath the sofa. Yeah. So it's a double win.
And space here is normally lost right behind the sofa on the edge at the back. It's we were losing it before. We've used it to store sports equipment and stuff like that, but it really is. It's no major loss.
No.
But now what we can do is we can make that actually kind of. So we've talked about the drawers on the lower bit, but actually on the upper bit we can have a section that's just kind of quite a thin drop down space.
Condiments, who knows what. Yeah.
Wine, rum. Yeah. All the essentials.
Yes. Yeah. Continuing on aft then, after the engine bay, you've then got the master cabin, the aft cabin. This is, at the minute, you have to go through the only heads on the boat to get to the master cabin. It's a little bit intrusive, it's not very nice. So adding a second heads up in the fore section is great. But this is in effect going to be the captain's cabin. It's going to have its own heads, its own shower and toilet, big double bed. And as we mentioned before, we're going to be moving backwards into the area that the lazarette currently takes up. It's going to be a high bed again. You're going to have to step up into it because we have the tiller system, hydraulic tiller system underneath the bed. So we can't go too low. But it will mean that actually this space at the back will be a nice big space. It's going to be roughly about 3.5 meters front to back. Over 3 meters wide in places as well. So it's a big old space. Lots of storage underneath the double bed, lots of storage on the opposite wall.
Plenty of room for books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we are talking about, if we can manage it, to have a new porthole going from the very aft of the cabin through onto the dive platform steps. We don't know if that'll work or not, but if it does, that'd be great. Yeah. Where we're covering over the lazarette, we're talking about replacing. It's currently got a perspex domed hatch there, which is great for really bad weather. You can check the sails conditions, that sort of thing, without actually going outside. But the new cockpit setup means that actually that's not an issue anymore. So if we put a flat hatch there, it will mean getting around on the deck on that aft section much easier, much more less constricted. So we're looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the domed hatch at the back, whilst being great, a lot of the metal around it is quite rotten. So we're going to have to do quite a fair bit of welding there. So to cut it back and to put a new window in isn't the end of the world, actually. It's something that probably needs to happen.
We've got to do it anyway. Yeah. And that's it. yeah, that's our plans as they stand at the moment. As I say, it's currently April 2021.
Not going outside.